talent.
Seattle got talent, yo.
Yeah, great, perfect. So we'll go ahead and start now, and then people will roll through, I think, for the different time frames that the candidates will be on. So welcome everyone. I'm really happy that you are here with us. My name is Samait Mel, and I am with the Partners in Change, a program of the Equity in Education Coalition. In this forum, we are not utilizing the webinar functionality of the Zoom online platform. As you can tell, we find that using the meetings functionality provides us a broader sense of community and inclusion. So in this respect, we will ask everyone who is not a candidate, a co-host or moderator to mute your Zoom. You are welcome to add questions you may have to the chat in the Zoom box. We have worked with our partners to narrow down our questions for the allotted time that we have within each race. If your question is not answered, we will make sure to communicate these to the candidates and make these questions available to you. And for our candidates, as they come on, Sharon Navas will be the timekeeper on screen for your questions. And if you want to be in touch, please add your email in the address, or you can send them over to us. With that, I will go ahead and welcome Equity in Education's Board President, Mr. Hariam Martin Morris, for our welcome and introductions. Hariam, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Semes. Good afternoon and welcome to the Partners in Change Candidate Forum. I'm Hariam Martin Morris, Board Chair of the Equity and Education Coalition, a statewide nonprofit community-based coalition of organizations in support of robust, meaningful, and quality education for the low-income and BIPOC community. The events of the past several years have highlighted the importance of each of us participating in the election process. Being informed and voting is part of that participation. As Jefferson put it, a well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny. By being here today, you show your willingness to participate and be informed. This candidate forum affords us an opportunity to hear directly from candidates on important issues that face the citizens of our region. We have invited all the candidates running for the races today and who are up for election. I hope that you listen carefully and learn about each of the candidates running for King County Executive, King County Council District 5, and Seattle Mayor. Before we begin with questions, we have short video messages from Congress members Jayapal and Kilmer. Thank you.
Can't hear.
Somebody may have anything.
There's no audio.
Oh, there's no audio. Okay. Let me change it and make it one more time. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Share sound. That's what I should have done. Okay.
I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and I'm honored to represent Washington's 7th Congressional District in the House of Representatives, where I also serve as the proud chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Welcome to today's Partners in Change Candidate Forum. Today, you will hear from candidates running in the King County Executive race, King County District 5 race, and Seattle mayoral race. These are critically important elections that will shape and determine the future of our county, the future of our city, and the future for everyone who calls our beautiful region home. I want to thank you for joining today and for taking part in our democracy. Every election matters, whether it's the presidency or those happening on the ground right here. So thank you for doing your part and for being so engaged in bringing change to our community. Make sure to listen carefully tonight, ask the questions that matter to you, continue participating, and of course, vote, vote, vote. It is so important that we get all of our friends, family members, and neighbors to join us in mailing back our ballots or dropping them in our neighborhood drop boxes before the evening of November 2nd. Your vote matters. Your voice matters. And I want to thank you once again for using it tonight and in the days ahead. That's what democracy is about.
Hey folks, Representative Derek Kilmer here, proudly representing Washington's 6th District, which includes Tacoma and the Olympic and Kitsap Peninsulas. Listen, I'm honored to be here and I support the values and goals of this event. Thank you to the organizers, both for the work you do in our region, but also for promoting engagement with our elections process. This coalition of organizations is promoting hope and compassion and engagement with their communities, all with the goal of making positive change in our democracy. And that is a great thing. I'm a believer in promoting people-powered democracy. Together, the American people have ended wars, empowered people who've been disrespected and disenfranchised, passed laws to protect American values like women's rights, as well as clean air and clean water. Change has happened, sometimes slower than we've wanted, but change has happened when people show up. And events like this one tonight strengthen our democracy by getting more people involved in the process so we can all be partners in change. It empowers us to listen to those who seek to represent us, to ask them questions focused on the issues that matter to our community, and ultimately to choose the people who will be making decisions regarding how to fix tough problems. And we've got tough problems to solve. Our region is working to recover from the COVID crisis. We're working to ensure everyone can have a roof over their heads and the ability to put food on their tables. We're working to reduce gun violence. We're working to ensure that the next generation can get a top-notch education, can earn a great living, and be respected for who they are. We're working to create a more just society where we recognize that our diversity is our strength. Listen, none of these issues can be solved on their own. It takes a village, and your presence here tonight is a testament to your commitment in that regard, and that gives me hope. And we could use some hope right now. In the last month, Tacoma saw 2 terrible incidents of violence, one against a monk and a nun in a Buddhist temple, another after an arsonist set fire to the Islamic Center. These attacks rip at the fabric of our community, but part of the effort to strengthen our communities is to bring light where there is darkness, to stand side by side with the families and victims of these events, and to work to build communities filled with more love and less hate. Many of the sponsors of this event tonight have been part of those efforts, and that gives me hope too. My friends, the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs explained the difference between optimism and hope. Optimism, he said, was a passive virtue. It was the belief that things would get better. Hope, he said, was different. It was an active virtue. It was the belief that together we can make things better. He said it doesn't take courage to have optimism, but it does take courage to hope. So what's that mean for each of us? It means we have to continue to show up, just as you have all done for this event. We have to stay involved. We have to vote. And we have to do more than that. We have to volunteer, to talk to our neighbors, and we have to all have the courage to recognize that together we can make things better. So please keep participating. Our democracy and our future depend on it. Thanks so much.
Great. That was great messages from both of them. I'm going to go ahead and invite Claudia Kaufman, former state senator, to give land acknowledgement. Thank you, Claudia. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Claudia Kaufman. I would like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional lands of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe, past, present, and in the future. The Muckleshoot Indian tribe is the federally recognized tribe whose usual and accustomed places include Seattle and King County. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudia. Up next, Sharon Navas, do you want to provide any statements from the EEC? We heard from Hariam, but as the ED.
I just want to thank everybody for being here. As Hariam and Representative Kilmer have said, as well as Representative Jayapal, you know, it is really great to see all of us here engaged in doing this. I do want to let everybody know that we did invite all of the candidates who are currently on the ballot for the November election. So this is not one-sided. We have invited all folks who are currently seeking an elected position within these races. Some folks decided that they could not or would not make it here today, and that's up to them. I'm sure some schedules were really, really busy. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we did do our due diligence in terms of getting folks who are currently on the ballot invited to today's panel. So thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Savong Lam.
Hi, good afternoon, Jaripso everyone. My name is Savong Lam, and I'm with the Khmer Anti-Deportation Advocacy Group. We are super excited to hear from the King County executive race this afternoon with candidates Senator Joan Nguyen and Executive Dow Constantine. Candidates, you both will be given 1 minute each per person for opening statements. And you will have 1 minute to answer each question. Your microphone will be muted once the minute is up. We apologize for this inconvenience ahead of time, but we have to stay on track with our time. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Yolin Connor. So Senator Jan Nguyen and Secretary Constantine, you both have 1 minute for opening statement, beginning now.
Perfect. Let me just hop in. Perfect.
I am your timekeeper, so I will let you go. I do want to make sure that we do not have a representative from the executive's office or the executive himself. If that is the case, I would not shut somebody down if they went over a minute.
Okay, sounds good. You know, we can get wordy, so I appreciate that heads up. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Senator Joe Nguyen, currently the state senator in the 34th legislative district. So that includes White Center, Burien, West Seattle, Vashon, and Moriallen. And I'm so honored to serve here because my family is from this area. My parents were refugees from Vietnam, and the reason why we came to the United States is because we had access to public housing in White Center, where I was born and grew up in Burien as well. And it is an honor to be with this group of friends and familiar faces. I got into politics because we could no longer sit on the sidelines as we watched our communities be impacted by policies that were being led by other people. So when I first ran for office, it was because I wanted to make sure that we uplifted and amplified the voices of those in the communities, especially those who've been historically left out. And in my time in the legislature, it has been increasingly clear that we deserve to have our voices in this space. Under the most diverse legislature in the history of Washington State, we've seen transformative policies, things that have been discussed for decades finally being pushed through, because now the people closest to the pain were also closest to the power, being able to affect positive change. And that's what we can do for King County as well. My experience as a young person from a refugee community, my experience having grown up utilizing social services after my father was in a car accident, and my experience now in the public and private sector make me uniquely qualified for this role as well. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I see a good list of questions. We're happy to jump in.
Thank you so much, Senator Nguyen, for your opening statement. Our first question is on education. We understand that you would not have decision-making power regarding school district policies. However, we would like to know your suggestions for how to address the issue of the school to prison pipeline and how communities most impacted should be incorporated in this process.
Yeah, first off, I think the county executive and the county in general, one of their key functions is working with other local jurisdictions, including our school board. So I do think even if they don't have direct control over it, there should be strong partnerships in that space, especially when it comes to juvenile justice. because the county does administer those programs right now. I was very clear that I did not believe we needed a youth jail. Instead, I believe we needed diversion programs and community facilities that offered special assessments and needs-based solutions for our young people. And that's how we can actually help, is providing a diversion or referral program so that our young people don't have to go through the legal system in the first place. And that's just not talk. One of my first bills in the legislature was to help enable the family intervention referral services at King County for them to remove folks from these facilities into more humane community-based solutions as well. But you're talking everything from diversion programs, augmenting local services. That includes having community centers, which there's no office that manages community centers in King County, even having partnerships with parks and recreations to ensure that our young people have access to other opportunities. All of those things can go towards disrupting that cycle. There's organizations like Choose 180, Community Passageways, and others that are working in this space. So investing in those communities and those types of solutions are how we can disrupt this violent cycle in order to kind of break that prison to schools, schools to prison pipeline.
Thank you.
Senator, next question is small business. If elected, how will you implement different resources to help many historically underrepresented BIPOC business?
Yeah, thank you. You know, King County is the 12th largest county in the entire United States. It is bigger than 14 states, yet there's no Office of Economic Development in King County, which to me is a huge opportunity for us, especially when you look at the wealth of talent and energy that we have in these spaces. Right now, there's only one person who is working on something like this within local services, but it is not a full department. I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do. And having that office have at least resources to address some of the folks who are in these communities to be successful. And my family, when we first moved over from Vietnam, had a small business in White Center. And I will tell you, as a young person who had to navigate and translate documents, having professional services that were in language to negotiate leases, to help with taxes, to make sure that we manage the regulatory processes, those are some of the key functions that we can truly help our neighbors. Because oftentimes, and I'm not trying to stereotype, but we'll have great food, great services. My mom happened to be a seamstress, but being able to navigate the regulatory environments was where the hiccups happened, where we fell into a lot of problems that we then had to navigate, which meant, a 7-year-old had to translate documents for their parents, which is obviously not ideal. So I think having an Office of Economic Development that had access to those types of professional services is one thing. Even with this pandemic, I've talked to a number of communities of color that owned restaurants. And one of the biggest problems is also negotiating with their landlords, being able to kind of figure out how to handle the tenant landlord situation, and even having legal aid in those capacities. Oftentimes the conversations are not easy, but when you have a lawyer present, they seem to go a little bit better as well. So having legal aid in that space. King County did have grants for small businesses in unincorporated areas that was up to $25,000. I'm not sure if all of that was spent, but I do know that some communities were left out because they had their businesses for under a year and they were capped. I think we should remove that cap if the funds are actually there. And then let's be honest, there are some communities that have been hit harder than others. And I'm speaking on behalf of White Center at this point. And I think diverting some of those funds for areas that especially need that help, I think is one of the key ways that we can do this. And even having the opportunities to access capital through loans. Loans are not necessarily the best way to go, but if we are running out of resources, but we do have access to loans, helping manage low interest rate loans to actually help our communities get back on their feet. So there's a whole host of things that we can do in that space.
Thank you. So our next question is on immigration. Let's consider how welcoming cities and states play a big role in newcomers and residents living and working together. If elected, what plans do you have for successful integration for new incoming residents, considering housing and other supportive services?
Yeah, thank you. And I benefited from that, right? So selfishly, my family were able to benefit from that when we first came over in 1980, when they first immigrated from Vietnam, and I was born here as well. And it's kind of the high level themes that I would probably list off is how do we help residents become stable as quickly as possible? And that's making sure that we are able to connect those who are coming with access to services. How do we ensure that we have also economic opportunities as well? which is kind of what we talked about with economic development. In the long term is how do we just have stable and affordable housing so folks aren't always going to be financially insecure because of affordability issues. A lot of that stuff can be done with the augmentation of work already with King County through the Immigrant and Refugee Commission under the Office of Equity, which I think a couple of folks here are involved with. And one of the key findings from some of the reports a couple of years ago was that there was a lack of language and cultural competencies when it comes to service providers. So we'll spend all this time and money on having these resources available, and there's all these people who need help, but there were barriers involved towards getting those opportunities. And a lot of it is just because things are a little bit different for communities that are just coming forward, or there's a lack of trust too. So in my case, from Vietnam, folks had a different type of relationship with their government. So you need to have that language and cultural competency to build trust within communities, to get access to these resources that are available. So I think that's how we hopefully get people stable when they first come over here, and then being able to connect them with long-term opportunities, which we certainly have in these spaces as well. And if they're going to start small businesses, which oftentimes they do, having those professional resources. But what's interesting is I actually met with Ralph Monroe. I'm not sure if folks remember who he is, but he did a lot of work to help the Vietnamese community when they first came over. And there were even more basic things, making sure that we have access to news and communications in language to help folks who are coming over feel not just informed about what was going on, but connected to their communities as well. Because I think it can be very isolating when you're leaving your home. So helping build that community through news and communications. And this may sound weird, but he made a point to say, like, TVs. They actually, when folks were coming over from Vietnam, would give every family a TV. And I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but that's how I learned how to speak English growing up. So I thought that was a fantastic idea as well. So it's that whole gambit: access to resources, getting people access to economic opportunities, and making sure that we're building a community so people are feeling welcomed.
Thank you, Senator. This question really relates to me and my community. If elected to office, how will you be supporting undocumented and unemployed folks who cannot collect unemployment insurance?
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why, again, at the state level, we fought so hard to have the Immigrant Relief Fund so that people who were impacted by the pandemic but didn't have access to traditional resources had a separate fund where we could allocate out. I think we augment those resources, but even having, say, for instance, legal aid. So if folks are having a dispute with potentially their employers as well, having the resources to make sure that you are getting paid for the work that you did do. So I think we can have separate mechanisms outside of ones funded by the federal government, specifically for communities that are most impacted in this space, especially those who are undocumented. I think that's probably the best thing that we can do in that space as well.
Our next question is regarding public health, specifically COVID-19 and anti-Asian, Southeast Asian hate and violence. If you are elected into office, what is your comprehensive plan to address anti-Asian hate and bias?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, this is near and dear to my heart for a lot of reasons. And I'll just say that this is not actually new. I know that this has become more aware in the mainstream, but this is something that I think our communities have faced for a long time. But I'll start with saying that we need to have resources to help care for the victims of this violence, whether it's crisis intervention services, including mental health, oftentimes too, encouraging folks to report hate crimes. I know, I don't want to speak on behalf of anybody else, but oftentimes growing up, when negative things like this happen, you're told to keep your head down and lay low because you don't want to be at risk of potential more harm. But in this case, if you don't report these hate crimes, they go unaddressed. So encouraging our communities to report these as well. So advocating for that awareness. The historic harms to the AAPI community, especially our women, obviously is not something new, but something that is being brought to the forefront. And I'll even say that my first speech on the Senate floor, on the Washington State Senate floor, was met with ridicule of my last name. So that may not necessarily seem as if it's the same, but it is. When you marginalize people, when you don't take the time to learn about their backgrounds, when they become othered, oftentimes is where you get this area of hate, and it's largely based off of ignorance. So as a community, as an elected official, as a government, we can push back against racist tropes, against yellow peril, and making sure that we aren't just perceived as foreigners. And one of the things that we can do to flip this paradigm is that as we're engaging in community, empowering the Asian organizations, communities, and promoting solidarity with other folks as well. So making sure that we're intentional about ensuring that the Asian community is standing with the Black community or other nonprofits and services, so that folks are seeing us as leaders within this space. And I get that this is not necessarily the county, but also teaching the Asian American history, showing that we have the history here and pushing it back against a model minority myth as well. And one of the biggest things that may not necessarily be related, but disaggregating data as it relates to the Asian community for us to truly assess the impacts of various groups and organizations as well. But there's a bunch of things that we need to be doing in this space. And truly what I think is uplifting voices of members of that communities, because when people start seeing themselves in positions of power and in government and other spaces, it humanizes the whole experience. And my last name is one of the most common last names in all of King County. And this will be the first time just about everybody, except for the folks who live in the 34th, will see it on the ballot in King County. So I think it's that kind of stuff where we can try to address the systemic harms, but also focus on the future and uplifting the voices that are in these communities so that we can show that we have examples of what success is, and we're not just going to be othered anymore.
Thank you. I'm not sure. Do I ask the next question or somebody else? Samit?
Yes, it's you.
Oh, okay, thank you. How will you work with our partners and organization to educate and vaccinate our community members, create strong messaging to youth under 12 years old in school for safe guidelines and sanitation, and your plans around COVID-19 resources and assistance if we have to close back down?
Yeah, so here I'll just start by saying the experts are in the community, and just because it's this group, probably one of the best things that the county can do is get out of the way, right? We have a lot of experts in this space who are trusted messengers in this space. And having talked to some of these organizations and groups during the vaccine rollout, and obviously with public health previously, is that oftentimes the county has a perspective that is different than what the community organizations believe is best, and there becomes an issue associated with it. I think it's having humility as a local government, being able to allocate resources without having extra barriers and having all this means testing that makes it even more difficult to serve our communities as well. So I think that's probably one of the most transformative things that we can do is trust our community partners, give them the resources, and then get out of the way. And that's probably the thing that I hear most often as well, is because for some reason, if you're, I'll just say it, if you're a white-led, larger nonprofit, you get allocated hundreds of millions of dollars, you're good to go. If you're not, if you're a smaller organization and you're trying to serve a specific community, there's all this red tape. So I think we have the expertise. I think we have the resources. Again, I think we should just get out of the way. And then in terms of safety guidance and sanitations and plans for if we were to have to close down again, I think really we know what communities are most hit when it comes to this pandemic, and knock on wood, hopefully with the vaccinations coming up and higher numbers and are under 12 being able to get access soon, we don't have to face this situation. But we know which communities are going to be most hit if we do have to shut down. We can target our resources and relief in those particular areas so these families can stay home and shelter from the pandemic versus having to pick between their livelihoods and literally their lives. And especially when you talk about school-aged kids, access to childcare is a key factor in terms of being able to stay safe as well. So allocating resources strategically in those spaces to ensure that the communities most impacted can actually shelter so they don't contract COVID-19.
Thank you, sir. We have a follow-up question. If you have been county executive in early 2020, what would you have done differently?
Oh yeah, I mean, when you talk about the vaccine, well, so in general, or because there's a lot of things that I think I would have done a little bit different in terms of the pandemic response.
I believe in general.
Oh, here, I'll go with pandemic response because I know that we're a little bit short on time. It was difficult to work. So look, we need to get the vaccines out as quick as possible, and it isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And when you have a public health approach that has historically been underinvesting in certain communities, there will always be issues. And like I said before, is giving resources to local nonprofits and organizations and getting out of the way. One of the things that I heard as well from communities was that oftentimes they'd get very little notice from when they have to set up something that was unique for a local community and when they would know when they would be able to get a number of vaccines. So I think being able to give people more time, more leeway, allocating vaccines for communities that were underserved, which we saw had the higher rates of COVID, would be very helpful for those communities as well. And then when we partner with local organizations, it's not enough to say, hey, I talked to this group over here. You really have to give resources and autonomy as well. I do believe that in general, King County did better than most other places. However, I would look towards the community members to lead in this space as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I know we have a few more questions, but due to time, we're going to go ahead and move into the candidate's closing statement. Senator Nguyen, you have 1 minute. Can you please share with us your closing statement?
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me. And I feel so honored to be here just because there are so many familiar faces. But candidly, the reason why I'm running for office right now is that we are at a unique moment that requires urgency. When we're seeing things like racial inequality, income inequality, obviously this pandemic has exposed so many of the harms in our communities that we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to create positive change. And the fact that I'm running in this race obviously tells you that I'm a bit impatient and that we cannot wait any longer as well. But also I do understand that this is audacious for me to take on a race like this, but that's also why you will see someone like me fight hard to address this issue. The status quo has not been working for us, and it requires new leadership with a new style of thinking where we're doing things proactively and not reactive, where you don't have to just fight to make sure that your voice is being heard. It is being uplifted and amplified, where you have people with lived experience affected by poor policies, but also the experience of success in the private and public sector now in leadership, showing that we can get things done in a different way. So that's why I'm running for King County. I believe our communities deserve more. And I believe that we are in a moment that requires urgency. And I am that leader for the county right now.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for participating in our candidate forum. We look forward to following up with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Next, we would like to introduce a local artist whose contribution makes our region a more vibrant, diverse, and inclusive community.
Vengo del silencio puro y del estruendoso vientre de mi madre, que lloraba penas antiguas, llorando la tierra del destierro y recordando el desamor. Vengo del lugar de los sin tierras, de los despojados de su etnia. Vengo de una historia vieja mal contada, donde las piezas que faltan no encajan en la mentira contada. Vengo corriendo a empujones, tropezando, divagando. Y a veces caminando desde ese lugar. Vengo arrastrando cadenas, levantando polvo que poco a poco se vuelve tierra firme en mis pies cansados. Vengo de la duda de la existencia, del maltrato, del abuso, de la ausencia. Vengo escapando desde el lugar donde perdí mi inocencia. ¿Que de dónde vengo? Vengo del ser de mi padre y de su ausencia eterna. ¿Que de dónde vengo? Vengo de mi madre, de mi padre y del sueño de mis ancestros. ¿De dónde vengo? Vengo del agua clara, del amanecer que siempre da esperanza, de la lluvia que fertiliza la tierra. Vengo de recorrer montañas escondiendo miedos y regando flores. Vengo con el latir del corazón, replicando el sonido del tambor que resuena en mis caderas. Vengo de la mañana que amanece frondosa, con su aire fresco, con su aroma húmedo de madrugada, con su orquesta de grillos y su aroma de café colado. Yo vengo al río para que me abra el camino de mi encuentro.
Mi nombre es Milvia Berenice Pacheco Salvatierra, hija de Naisarí Encarnación Salvatierra y José de los Santos Pacheco, nieta de María de Lourdes Salvatierra y Miguel García. Soy una mujer negra, and a black woman. I'm here in Seattle. Thanks.
Wow, are you all excited yet? That was a fantastic performance. So my name is Falakia Oyebola with the Kent Community Development Collaborative, and Angela Castaneda and I will be your moderator for this next segment. We're excited to hear from King County District 5 candidate Shukri Olo. You will be given 1 minute for your opening statement, and then you'll have another 1 minute to answer each question. Your microphone will be muted once the minute is up. We apologize for this inconvenience ahead of time, but we have to stay on track.
We can begin with candidate Shukri Olo. You have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share a bit more about who I am and why I'm running. And thank you to the artists and all of you for putting on this incredible program together. My name is Dr. Shukri Olo. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And like thousands of residents from this district, I am a proud refugee. I came to this country by way of the refugee camps in Kenya in 1996. I grew up right here in South County. I grew up in public housing in the city of Kent. I was raised by an incredibly strong Black mother taking care of 3 children by herself. I am a product of this community and an example of the possibilities when young people are loved on and loved upon. I'm also a mother, a community organizer. By day, I work for Best Starts for Kids and a candidate for King County Council District 5. And listen, this is a democracy. And after 20 years of the incumbent, the people of the most diverse district in King County, in Martin Luther King County, are ready for new leadership with lived experience. They are ready for someone who will lead with a sense of urgency and center the experiences of those of us who are at the intersections of oppression. And I'm honored that this message has resonated with Planned Parenthood, a recommendation from the Progressive Voters Guide, The Stranger. And I would be honored to have your support come November 2nd as the first Black woman elected to any county council position in Washington. Shukran. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shukri. We understand that you would not have decision-making power regarding school district policies. However, we would like to know your suggestions for how to address the issue of the school to prison pipeline and how communities most impacted should be incorporated in this process.
Awesome. Is it just me again, or is Councilmember Updegrove not here?
Unfortunately, for other members of the community, Dr. Shukri Alal, you're the only candidate for this position that is currently here.
Okay.
So I would not really worry about the 1 minute situation.
And that's what I was wondering. Let me take my time, Sharon.
Of course, Dr. Alal, you take all the time you want, girl.
Okay, I appreciate you. So I will start by saying I'm probably the only candidate who has a direct service background. My background is in public health and human services. I used to work for Seattle Public Schools, spent about 3 years there working on this grant that was focused on reducing chronic absenteeism and discipline for African and African-American students. And our theory of change was that if you invest in community-based organizations, if you provide educators and our teachers, trainings and professional development on undoing institutional racism within the K-12 education, if you support parents and caregivers in being able to better support their scholars, then we will have an opportunity to create and really support scholars who have a school to success pathway. And so I give you that context because I come from that background of working in K-12 education. And the second thing is I work by day at King County with Best Starts for Kids. It's an initiative that is invested in supporting prevention, promotion, and treatment for our youth from prenatal up until the age of 24. My strategy as the youth development strategy lead, we are focused on centering young folks, building positive racial identity, connecting them to mentors that look like them, being able to connect youth with other young people to build healthy relationships. And so ultimately what we're trying to do is get at, decades of institutional racism and barriers that our young people have faced and have been impacted by, so that they can have a different trajectory. And the final thing that I'll say as a candidate is that I have a commitment to partner in intentional ways with organizations in our community, like the Equity in Education Coalition, shout out to y'all, and all of you for the incredible work that you do on behalf of our communities, to truly provide you with the resources that you need to do the incredible work that you're doing on behalf of our communities. I've also met with our school district superintendents, Dr. Watts before he left Kent School District, Dr. Patnott in Renton, Dr. Watts in Dr. Susan Enfield in Highline, trying to understand what more the county can do. Currently, the county is not doing much in terms of education, and I have this deep commitment, both as an educator myself and as a parent, to create a different pathway for our youth, especially Black and Brown youth.
Angela, do you want to queue up your question?
Yes, sorry about that. We do have a question. Small businesses and economic development. In King County, more than 20% of the tax filing population report small business income. And in Seattle, studies show we have 2.5 small businesses per 100 residents. What will you do to help our small BIPOC businesses build capacity, expand their market, and rebuild during these difficult times?
Yeah, great question, Angela. You know, I am the daughter of a small business owner. My mother is a childcare provider right here in this district. And she started her business as an in-home family childcare provider back in 2009. And I remember just the endless paperwork that she had to fill out and trying to figure out, you know, what is this grant opportunity and, you know, what is the work of the union, you know, especially being a dual language speaker, right? And so I know that many of our businesses, many of them, especially Black and Brown communities, have been neglected, not just during this pandemic, but prior to this pandemic, many of them were not getting the resources that they need. I actually began a conversation, a listening session with small business owners in the district, met with Ephraim at Bunbuna in Brenton, a great coffee shop if you're into Ethiopian Eritrean coffee, met with Tony Hayes at Classic Eats, met with Todd Miner here at Nana's Kitchen, my mother and childcare providers. And one of the things that I heard is that we need access to capital for small business owners, that we need to be able to provide in-language technical assistance for small business owners. Many of them are just trying to, you know, do their day-to-day work, right? Instead of trying to figure out what is this saying, even in English, right? They need to be able to get that additional support so that they understand all the different opportunities and especially grants that are out there. And finally, I would say that we need stronger public-private partnerships. And that includes partnerships with our chambers and our ethnic chambers so that small businesses are able to get the technical assistance and other resources that they need. I'll pause there.
Thank you.
Thank you. This next question is in relation to immigration. Considering how welcoming cities and states play a big role in newcomers and residents living and working together, if elected, what plans do you have for successful integration of new incoming residents? Consider housing and other support services.
Great question. You know, because we believe in manifesting our dreams, I'm going to reframe that as when elected, God willing. You know, I actually wrote about this in the South Seattle Emerald in an op-ed called From Somalia to Afghanistan, We Stand with Our Newest Neighbors. I, as an immigrant, as a refugee to this country, came here some 23 years ago. And I remember the resources that were able to shift in our favor, right? You know, including having, support within the education system, including having access to the local food banks, including having social workers who were able to walk my mother through the different, supports that were available in the community, including having access to a Section 8 voucher that kept my family in place so that my mother, who was working 2 to 3 jobs in housekeeping, did not have to worry about us being evicted, right? And so that is exactly what I believe we need to have for all of our communities. We need access to housing. We need access to a quality education. We need access to ethnic-based and community-based organizations who are able to support our communities, who are anchored in community, who are able to help many of them, all of our communities, navigate through these oppressive systems. And finally, you know, I think a lot about the word belonging. As a young person, as a Black Muslim woman, grew up in South County, I struggled with feeling like I belong here. It's actually our campaign's theme. It came from our youth team. Many of them also struggle with the sense of belongingness. And so I would say that we need to create an environment and the conditions for all people in our community to know and to feel like they belong here, that they can dream here, that they can also run for office here. I'll pause there. I can, you know, I'm ethnically Somali, so I can talk all day.
Thank you, Dr. Shukri. If elected to office, how will you be supporting undocumented and unemployed folks who cannot collect unemployment insurance?
Yeah, I was actually listening to Senator Nguyen talk about the Washington Relief Fund, and it's an example of what happens when you have people who have lived experience, who are now in these powerful positions representing their communities. I think that's an example of the supports that we could provide to our undocumented community, is being able to have an access to a compensation fund or a relief fund for when times are hard, and actually not just for when times are hard, right? to have that be a sustainable fund for our communities to be able to tap into. And ultimately, I think we need a pathway to citizenship for our undocumented community. I am a proud board member of One America. We just had a rally just about a week ago. I was the MC at that rally. I know that too often we think about people as just numbers, right? And I remember hearing the story of one of the young people who spoke at that rally. Abril is her name, and she talked about her family being undocumented. And we need a pathway for all of our communities to stay here, to know that they belong here.
Thank you. We're going to go on to our next question regarding public health, COVID-19 and anti-Asian/Southeast Asian hate and violence. If you are elected into office, what is your comprehensive plan to address anti-Asian hate and bias? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think, similar to what Senator Nguyen mentioned, that this isn't something that's new, right? This has historically been the case that many communities at different times of immigration have been othered in this country. And, it is what white supremacy does, right? It often divides communities and creates this sort of difference between us. What I think is important to note is that we have to have a commitment to getting to root causes, right? And I mentioned white supremacy because I think that is the root cause of not only anti-Asian hate, but all forms of hate. I think, another key commitment that I have is to be able to partner, to fund and to invest in communities, to provide access to a victims compensation fund, to provide access to a language, and not just access, but also utilization. And finally, as a Black Muslim woman who grew up at the post 9/11 world, I understand firsthand what happens when others are othered. We must disrupt and dismantle structural inequities and institutional racism. And I think we can do that with the leadership of our community-based organizations who are creating that vision for all forms of government, not just at the county level.
Thank you. We would like to know how you would work with our partners and organizations to educate and vaccinate our community members, create strong messaging to youth under 12 years old in schools for safe guidelines and sanitation, and what are your plans around COVID-19 resources and assistance if we have to close back down? You have
I think, God forbid, listen, as a mother of two, it's been a lot, and I'm sure that it's been a lot for a lot of our communities. I don't know that government could have stepped up in the ways that you all have in the last 18 or so, or however long it's been. It's been a long 20 years that we've been in this pandemic. I think the ways that organizations like the Somali Health Board, like Equity Education Coalition, like many of the organizations that are embedded and grounded in our community, the ways that you've all been able to show up for our communities has just been remarkable. It is something that government will never be able to do, right? And I believe that. At my core, I believe that. And so I think that we need to invest in organizations like you all to be able to support our communities in getting access to information, to accurate information, and to encourage them to ultimately stay safe, right? I did a webinar on this or a Zoom event on COVID's impact in the Black community back in February, and Dr. Ben Danielson said, it is often those of us Black and Brown communities who are at the end of the line. And because of the work that you've done, we are no longer at the end of the line. And so I honor the work that you've all done and have a commitment to helping you to helping you get the funding that you need to sustain it.
Thank you, Dr. Alao. Vilma, I want to come over to former Representative Velma Valoria to ask her question about King County International Airport.
Oh, thank you. So my question, real fast, air and noise and greenhouse gas emissions from King County International Airport has disproportionately impacted BIPOC communities. Give us one proposal that you would think address this disproportionality.
Yeah, it is actually an important question that you raised, Feldman. Great to see you. I would say that it is not just this issue that continues to harm disproportionately Black and Brown communities. Often it is all of the issues, whether it's education or access to housing or access to transportation. What I would say is that KCIA accounts for, as we know, a chunk of the county's greenhouse gas emissions, but it doesn't fully account for the emissions in the air. And there's actually an article about this from Crosscut. And there are many communities, BIPOC communities in particular, who have been vocal about the impacts on surrounding communities, not to mention the CTEC expansion. One of the proposals that I think it's important to uplift is actually to engage our community and to get their wisdom and insight on how this would impact them. I think too often we have policymakers who just come up with these ideas without centering the experiences and the wisdom of the people that it directly impacts. And so I have a commitment to making sure that we engage all of our communities, but especially those who are disproportionately impacted by this issue. And finally, I would say, I think it's important to note, that Councilmember Updegrove has been supported by, the airlines like Alaska Airlines and has taken max donations from them. I'm not sure how he can talk about being able to hold, these companies accountable when he's been benefiting from them as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shukri. We thank you for answering our questions. We'd like to allow you to provide a closing statement. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so thank you again for the opportunity. I am known for accepting everything and like literally everything, but especially from people that I admire. I thank you for all that you're doing for our democracy. Listen, it's been, I think, one of the most challenging rides of my life, but with just 13 days to go, I've been really proud of the work that we've done in the ways that we've centered community, in the ways that we've been able to have intentional and authentic conversations with young people, with immigrants and refugees, with childcare providers, with those who are literally helping our county live up to its espoused values of racial justice. And I am proud, most proud of the integrity that we've led with over the last year. And I'm excited about the possibility of not only being the first Black woman elected to a county council position in Washington, but I'm most excited about the opportunity to create pathways for more of us to run, more of us to lead our communities. And I would be honored to have the support of you all come November 2nd, so we can do just that. I honor you. I thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you again for your participation, Dr. Shukri, in our candidate forum. We look forward to following up with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So next up, we'd like to introduce a capoeira performance by leaders and performers with the International Capoeira Angola Foundation, who will be sharing their talents and gifts with us to uplift community creativity and vibrancy.
provide an experimental educational space for teaching, sharing, creating a vibrant culture. We are here to promote capoeira for the community, for the city. We have open classes for kids and adults. And also, we believe capoeira is a way to work towards education, build community, and increase that idea of support each other in your city, Through the music, and through the instruments. That is Capoeira Angola. We are grateful to be here sharing this moment with you. Thank you so much.
That was another outstanding performance from our community. Hello, everybody. My name is Alexander Kam, and I'm with the Cambodian American Community Council of Washington. Falake and myself will be your moderators for the next segment. We are now going to hear from the City of Seattle mayoral candidates with Seattle Council President Lorena Gonzalez and former Seattle Council President Bruce Harrell. Candidates, you both will be given 1 minute each person for opening statements, and you will have 1 minute to answer each question. Your microphone will be muted once the minute is up. We apologize for this inconvenience ahead of time, but we have to stay on schedule.
Do we have Seattle Council President Lorena Gonzalez?
Yes.
I'm here.
Great. Okay, we'll see you.
I go first?
Yes.
Okay, got it. And where's the timer? Or you would just, okay. I see you, Sharon. All right, here we go. Well, thanks everyone for this opportunity to be in conversation and community with all of you. My name is Lorena Gonzalez. I am the proud daughter of Mexican immigrants who were once undocumented in our country. And I grew up as a migrant farm worker out in central Washington state. I earned my first paycheck at the age of 8. Went to community college first and then worked 3 jobs to put myself through college and became the first lawyer in the history of my family. And after becoming a lawyer, I practiced civil rights law, representing people in a variety of cases, but really taking on powerful interests, large corporations and discrimination cases, and also taking on police brutality cases on behalf of our community across the state, including here at SPD. I'm running to be the next mayor of the city because I believe it's time to center working families at City Hall. That's why I'm proud to be endorsed by the majority of labor unions who've made endorsements here, and also by every environmental organization that has made an endorsement in this race. I will be that climate justice mayor, and I will be the mayor who
Thank you. We will have to move on to former Seattle Council President Bruce Harrell. You have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. I sort of want to start off with a picture. People know I like showing pictures. So here's a string of flower shops right here in the central district of Seattle that my grandparents owned. It went the entire block on 14th and Yesler. And I start off with that to say this story, that was all taken by the government when my mother was interned with my grandparents during World War II. And my mother, who eventually became an activist in her own right here, she's in the kimono right there. You see on our website, fighting for justice when she got out of the camp, marrying my father, who was an African-American, who also was politically active. I tell that story to say that the mayor that I hope to be for all of you will be that mayor that will truly fight for you, that has a story here of building relationships, bringing in capital, strong educational policies. Look forward to the questions. That's all I can say in a minute, but I have a lifetime of experience to share with you that I want to bring as the next mayor of Seattle.
All right, this question pertains to education. We understand that you would not have decision-making power regarding school district policies. However, we would like to know your suggestions for how to address the issue of the school to prison pipeline and how communities most impacted should be incorporated in this process. You both have 1 minute.
We can begin with you first, Council President Gonzalez.
Sure. Well, I think that we begin by acknowledging that our kids, particularly in education, start behind the blocks from go. That's why I've been a big proponent of things like prenatal care and early learning in the 0 to 5-year-old space. That early learning opportunity is a great opportunity to break the cycles of the school to prison pipeline. I think the next mayor also has an opportunity to work hand in hand with the school board and the superintendent to make sure that there is cultural equity in the curriculum, and that a different kind of story is being told to make sure that our teachers are representing the values and the interest of the students who are actually attending there. That's why I supported things like teacher diversity and piloted a program there, and now have consistent funding in the K through 12 system for teacher diversity.
Former President Harrell, you may go next. Thank you.
Sure, and feel free to call me Bruce. So the first thing we're going to create is a new department. It's called the Seattle Job Center, and that will only people find out how to find jobs, whether it's an apprenticeship or in the arts and music industry, or working with their minds and developing code, whatever their gifts are. We're going to make sure we nurture the gifts and get them the grants, scholarships, training opportunities that they so need. Number one. Number two, as you may recall, I was the prime sponsor of banning the box for those that have committed crimes. I got to just be transparent with you. I grew up in the Central District back in the day. So when I talk about this demographic, it's not like I have to live very far. These are people I grew up with. So I proposed to ban the box because I need people not to recidivate and have opportunities for everyone. I fought for that my entire life. The last thing we're going to do as a city is we're going to bring in mentors, counselors, teachers, homework helpers, etc. All this bench strength in this city, I will give them a portal by which they will help our students using our rec centers and the real estate we own as a city. We will provide ancillary support to the school district. I remind you that I'm the attorney for the current superintendent, Dr. Brent Jones. Although he went to Franklin and I went to Garfield, I still love him. And so we're going to get real creative on what we're going to be able to do, because the city doesn't fund it directly. Although I was the first one to put funding in for school through the Seattle Promise. That was my idea. We'll continue to fund as much as we can, but I'm also going to bring in the bench strength of teachers, mentors, counselors, that relationship capital.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the small business question. In King County, more than 20% of the tax filing population reports small business income. In Seattle, studies show we have 2.5 small businesses per 100 residents. What will you do to help our small BIPOC businesses build capacity, expand their market, and rebuild during these difficult times? You both have 1 minute.
I'll start with you first, Lorena.
Okay, I'm happy. Am I going first every single time? I'm happy to do that, just so there isn't a delay. Okay, got it. I'm seeing the head nods and I'm first. Okay. So, supporting our small businesses is so important, and really acknowledging that our small business population is a population that is incredibly diverse, as framed in your question, is part and parcel of what I want to make sure to prioritize as the next mayor of Seattle. And so I think we do it a couple of ways. What I hear from small business owners is that they really need help with much of the technical assistance that was made available during COVID. And I plan to continue that technical assistance to make sure that our small businesses have the help they need to continue to navigate the business restrictions that seem to evolve every single day as we continue to deal with the realities of COVID. I also hear a lot about commercial affordability and needing to have the city reform its zoning laws, its permitting laws to allow for it to be easier to site and more affordable to site their businesses by having smaller square footage space and really allowing businesses to perhaps co-own space and co-share space in a way that really leverages their resources. And then the last thing is that, in this last cycle, I supported $10 million of investments to over 1,500 businesses that focused on BIPOC community owners, and I'll continue to support those direct assistance efforts.
Bruce, you may go ahead.
Okay, so I've been doing this work for a long time. I was a lawyer for the Central City Economic Development Association. I started a group called Performance First when I was on the executive council for the Puget Sound Regional Council. It's all about BIPOC small businesses. So this is what we're going to do. Working with organizations like the University of Washington Small Business Development Center, we're going to bring in what exactly this BIPOC community is asking for in terms of small businesses. Access to capital, number one. Helping out with strategic planning and social media, number two. Relationship capital, making sure that small BIPOC business owners have relationships with larger businesses such that they can spin off their products, services, and goods to these different organizations. That becomes critical in their success because many of them do not have that relationship capital. Now, many of you know, I actually, in the philanthropic community, I raise money and give money to this kind of work because that has been the backbone of our BIPOC communities of small businesses, because a lot of them do not have the formal education. So we're going to put structure around this in our Office of Economic Development Center, working again with our Seattle Job Center, because again, I need people to know how to get to jobs and I need the employers to know how to get to employees. So you're going to see an ecosystem of BIPOC business support under the Harrell administration.
Thank you, Bruce. All right, the next question pertains to immigration. Considering how welcoming cities and states play a big role in newcomers and residents living and working together, if elected, what plans do you have for successful integration for new incoming residents? Consider housing and other support services. You have 1 minute.
Well, for those of you who know me, know that I come from the immigrant rights movement. And part of my opening was sharing with all of you that my parents were once undocumented and really struggled to find a foothold, including housing and job and economic stability, in addition to the language barriers and the cultural barriers that exist when you are a new arrival. And so I think it's really important for us in this space to continue to build capacity of immigrant and refugee welcoming organizations that are really in the best position, in a much better position than government, to build that relationship with those immigrant and refugee communities, and to do that in a way that builds their own capacity and builds an infrastructure of resilience within our own communities, and also delivers direct services to our immigrant and refugee population as they need it. Part of what the city's role will be is to make sure that we are funding and scaling up the affordable housing that is needed, particularly for our families in the immigrant community that oftentimes live in multi-generational households. So we need to make sure we're building family-sized housing. We need to make sure that we're deeply subsidizing it so that it's affordable, and we need to be working together with people who can provide us housing vouchers to create that stability right away as our new neighbors arrive in our community.
Thank you, Lorena. Bruce?
Sure. So, as I've been campaigning now for 8 months, I hope that I'm not that candidate that starts criticizing everything that the city does. It's very seductive to do that. But the fact of the matter is the mayor and the city council's office are very proud of the work that they've been doing, looking at cultural institutions. By the way, I created the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs in 2012. But when I look at some of the investments they will do, and let me make this clear, we will remain a sanctuary city and we'll do everything humanly possible to make sure that pathway to citizenship is the easiest pathway possible, whatever's within the city's purview. I mean, my values speak for themselves and the work that I've done. But in terms of what the city's been recently done, what I was getting to was in terms of investing in cultural institutions, investing in housing strategies, particularly for the immigrant community, we will double down on these efforts. And I will say that the city in recent years have done a pretty darn good job of making sure these values are reflected in their investment strategies. I've been attending groundbreaking ceremonies and looking at some of the housing units that are being done for different communities. And we will accelerate that and double down on this strategy. And I'm very glad to see the city heading in the right direction in this respect.
Great, thank you both. So as a follow-up question on immigration, if elected to office, how will you both be supporting undocumented and unemployed folks who cannot collect unemployment insurance? You both have 1 minute.
Well, this is really an important question because, of course, we know that in the federal relief efforts, our undocumented community was left completely out of that relief, in spite of some strong champions that we have in our congressional delegation, particularly Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. And so I think that the mayor plays two important roles. One is to lift up the needs of our undocumented community and to work together with community advocates to do things like what we did together this last year, which is advocate to the state legislature that they create a fund specifically to meet the unmet needs of our undocumented community in the area of unemployment, for example. I would continue to do that work in partnership with community as the next mayor. And then the next thing that I would say is that we were very intentional in how we utilized our dollars in the Seattle Rescue Plan to provide direct cash assistance to immigrants including those who are undocumented, by way of cash assistance. And then the last thing I'll just say is that if elected mayor, I'm interested in pursuing a universal basic income program that would be made available to all residents in the city of Seattle, regardless of immigration status.
Bruce, you have the floor.
Sure. That's a really good answer. I mean, I'm not going to, those are great strategies and great commitments. What I will say that has been my strategy to make sure that, number one, I'm working with all of the community-based organizations, particularly those advocating for right for undocumented persons, to make sure that I am investing thoroughly in them. And whether these are attorneys or community-based organizations, making sure that they have the right advocates. It's been my impression that, particularly on ARPA funds, as an example, that those who have the resources to have the strongest advocates and the lobbyists and the attorneys, they seem to always get their fair share of things when there's resources. That will not happen under my administration. So we'll make sure that we drive with equity and that my community-based organizations and the attorneys, and I've headed a few legal organizations as a managing partner at a law firm downtown, that I'll make sure that we have the bench strength and the advocates to make sure we get our fair share of equity. So the strategy, as my opponent said, makes sense, and we'll double down on those efforts.
All right. And for the next questions for our candidates, we just want to give you the heads up that we will do 30 seconds for answering due to time constraints. So we just want to let everyone know that. Thank you. All right. The next question relates to public health, COVID-19, and anti-Asian/Southeast Asian hate and violence. If you are elected into office, what is your comprehensive plan to address anti-Asian hate and bias? You both have 1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute, not 30 seconds.
Excuse me, 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
I'm sorry, 30 seconds.
Such an important question. I am a big believer, again, and this is the second time you're going to hear me say this, is investing in the resilience of our own community, particularly focusing on how to protect our elders and making sure that there is sort of that strength there. And, we just worked together on this effort in the last wave of Asian violence, and was really proud to be able to work with community to make investments in those social well-being programs, as opposed to offering more policing, which we heard the community say that is not what they want. And so I appreciated the opportunity to partner with you all on that. And I'm going to continue to listen on how we can best protect our elders through those investments, and in doing so, reduce violence for us all and increase our collective feeling of safety.
Thank you, Lorena. Bruce?
In 30 seconds, I'll just say this, that this data suggests that 33% of Asians still live in fear because of the violence they've experienced. This is not new. We can go back to the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Executive Order 9066 that interned my mother. So this is not new. What we have to do, number one, is enforce the hate laws. Make no mistake about that. But we also have to address the root causes. When you saw that under the President Trump's blaming of Asians as an example, I have to go on a aggressive educational tour as well to change the narrative and talk about the beauty of our communities and make sure that we are reaching some of the most even unenlightened people. So as we enforce the hate laws and protect our communities, we are singing the praises and the contributions that our many communities have brought into this city and into this country.
Thank you both. As a follow-up, how would you work with our partners and organizations to educate and vaccinate our community members, create strong messaging to youth under 12 years old in schools for safe guidelines and sanitation, and your plans around COVID-19 resources and assistance if we have to go back to previous lockdown phases? Both have 30 seconds.
Vaccine equity and distribution in the equity system is so important. And I was really proud to, in my current role, organize a panel of, cultural community health providers to really lift up the needs around how we can be equitable in our vaccine distribution. And really, it's about, again, making sure that we are acknowledging the infrastructure within our community health clinics that are best positioned to gain the trust and deliver this important intervention to our community in a way that is culturally and linguistically relevant. So I will continue to advocate for that so that our grandpas and grandmas and aunties and uncles and our children can be protected from this deadly, deadly virus that is still ravaging many of our BIPOC communities.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, so for me, the issue is how do you develop trust? Now, we can educate, but if we don't develop trust, and so we have to invest into the faces and the organizations and the leaders and the community advocates who people trust, who are resistant to the vaccine. I mean, there's a reason why you see Tom Selleck on the commercials selling reverse mortgages, because some of the elderly people trusted this guy selling reverse mortgages. And so what I have to do as a strategy or to invest in the people, and people don't trust the government. I mean, why would I trust the government when in fact they interned my mother, right? So there's just still lingering mistrust. So my strategy will be to bring in and not only educate, but bring in the faces of community members and leaders who they trust to help protect everyone through the form of vaccine treatment.
Thank you, candidates. Next question is digital equity. How will you determine when to shut down schools because of COVID-19? Will there be a digital equity plan to support youth during the temporary broadband? You both have 30 seconds.
I think that with many of the state fixes that happened around allowing for public broadband, it is time for the city to get serious about implementing and truly addressing the digital divide within our communities by advancing meaningful progress on establishing public broadband in the city of Seattle. I don't think we can rely on philanthropy by corporations who have a monopoly in this area, like Comcast and others. And if the pandemic has shown us anything, is that internet inequity is even greater than we even imagined before the pandemic. And so that's why I'm proud to be endorsed by folks like Upgrade Seattle and Upgrade King County, who've been advocating for decades to get us municipal equitable broadband.
Thank you, Bruce.
So I think I'll break the monotony here with a picture. And the picture is this guy in college here. Now, why would I show you that picture? Now, was guy here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that as we shut down schools as the school district shut down schools for protection, I'll bring in mentors, teachers, counselors, advisors, homework helpers, and we will bring in all of the resources, computers, Wi-Fi, to make sure that we do not miss a gap. Education, Polly, is so critical to the success of our communities. It's our strongest weapon out of everything we've learned, that plus self-imaging. So under my approach, and the reason I brought that picture out is because that's what we did when we were in college. We tutored inmates at Monroe Reformatory, we tutored in high schools and middle schools, did that throughout the whole year, that particular year. So you're going to see me recruiting and putting structure around a strong mentoring and counseling program to once again bring in that relationship capital. I don't denigrate people or other people trying to help, because I want their help, I want their dollars, I want their expertise, and we're going to harness that for the betterment of our community. That's what helped me get to where I am today.
Great, thank you. This next question is in regards to creative economy and arts. In Seattle, the creative economy drives 18% of our gross. How will you connect tech and creative sectors to provide economic opportunities for creative professionals, particularly creatives of color? You both have 30 seconds.
I know exactly where you were going. There was an acronym there. The creative economy makes up a huge part of our revenue in the city of Seattle. And, they were the first to be hit and shut down and are in many instances the last to reopen. And so we have an opportunity through the next few years to more strongly center racial equity in our Office of Arts and Culture and make sure that film and music is still a part of that creative economy, and to ensure that we are creating cultural spaces for artists of color in various mediums to make sure that they are telling our stories, our history, and our stories as part of the legacy of the city of Seattle. And the last thing I'll say is that we have really relied on our arts community as an alternative to law enforcement and in creating restorative justice within our communities, and I will continue to invest in those programs.
Thank you, Bruce.
Sure. I think many of you know that when I did retire from politics, I became the chair of the board of a few arts and music venues, because for me, at least, arts and music and the spoken word and written word sort of just changed my life, continues to be an inspiration. So what we're going to do is use that not only as a hook for our artists, we're going to make sure we build housing for them. We will backfill in our budget the monies that many of our artists have lost. A lot of them lost a lot of revenue during this COVID. So I'll make sure that we use our general subfund budget to make sure that we reinvest into the artists and to the housing needs of the housing, because our admissions taxes were low, and that's one of the tools we will use. Make no mistake about it, the arts community, they've Allied Arts of Seattle endorsed me because my platform on making sure we protect our artists. It's a cultural gem, something that makes Seattle very special.
Thank you, Bruce. Velma, you're up for your question.
You're on mute. Nope.
Velma, I think you're still on mute.
You know, Velma doesn't like to be on mute.
Oh, trust.
All right, all right.
There she is.
Wait. I gotta say something, right?
6 years with her, I know.
We're past time, so I just wanted to close, if that's okay. I wanted to say thank you to Samet, to Hariam, and to Sharon and EEC for organizing this event. Thank you to all the participants, all the people that asked the questions, and the performers. You were fantastic. Thank you for bringing life to this event. Anyway, I wanted to also say that now that we know where our candidates stand, we need to get our communities out to vote. And it takes a lot. You guys got to make your phone calls, particularly for our communities, the communities of color. It's hard for them to go out to vote or to, to make those types of decisions. We even had ballot parties. So if there are people who that can do ballot parties, please do so. We just need to get our folks out to vote. And you need to keep in mind folks who did not show up the candidates who did not show up. So please, please, please get our communities out to vote. Thank you. Bye. Close the screen. Thank you.
Party's over. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
It's
Goodbye,
not your
everybody.
house, Mama.
And our closing statements already.
Oh, go ahead.
All right.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Velma. Thanks, Summit. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.